Peace. Join the fray. Rock this way. Real HD show. Show got something to say. Let's go. Hey, peace. Welcome to the Real HD Show. I'm your host, Vic. This is the higher discussion. This is the show that you're going to find on these or any other airwaves where we deal with the good, the bad, the ugly of our culture, but we heal it with what? Freedom music. Freedom music happens from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. You hit the link below. You join me backstage. We rock out to all that soulful, conscious hip hop that make your life feel good. You know what I mean? But for right now, and because we haven't been around for a while, we haven't done a couple of shows in a minute, had to, batten the hatches, kind of support the family, do some real important things. We're going to go through our sponsors really quick. So please like, share, and subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that every time the Real HD Show comes on, we can have a higher discussion. Also, bring 5 fans to the Real HD Show, courtesy of yourself. Receive a vacation for 4 days, 3 nights, courtesy of the Real HD Show, and redeem vacations. Also, go mob them, Total Package Energy, Melanated Company. They make energy supplements for that 3 to 5 o'clock crash that we always get. Please support. They got waters, juices, powders, gels, everything that you would need to get you up to speed. Total Package Energy. Please support our sync license drive that we're doing. $ the Real HD Show. Tap in. And before we go too far, let's begin. So we always do our segments before as the show starts. So one of the main segments that we always do and that I'm always thankful for is because we like to give thanks to our elders and our ancestors in the blueprint. So we're going to jump right into it right now on the Real HD Show. As soon as we can load this bad boy up, we will go. And this is going to be about the Buffalo Soldiers, but not the same type of Buffalo Soldier that you would think. This is about Kathy Williams, a sister that was a Buffalo Soldier. Elders and Ancestors Blueprint right here on the Real HD Show. Check it out. Fair use.
History is filled with many amazing firsts. And today I have interesting facts from the biography of Kathy Williams, the first documented Black woman to enlist in the Army. The life of Kathy Williams began in the month of September 1844. In her youth, Kathy worked as a house slave on the Johnson plantation. In 1861, Union forces took over there, with Williams being claimed with other slaves as contraband. The term contraband allowed for Union soldiers to have slaves work for the Union Army, cooking, cleaning, and performing nursing duties. At the age of 17, Williams served as an Army cook and washerwoman. She would travel with the infantries all over the country and even served under General Philip Sheridan, witnessing the Red River Campaign and the Battle of Pea Ridge. When the war ended in 1865, finding a job for African Americans was hard. Kathy knew as a soldier she could earn money, get health benefits, and eventually earn a pension if she became a soldier. At that time in history, though, women were not allowed to serve in the military. That is where Kathy reversed her name, enlisting in the military using the name William Kathy on November 15th in 1866. Now, if you're asking, how did she enlist without the Army finding out she was a woman? In 1866, the Army had no requirement for medical exams to enlist. During that time, there weren't many black Army units as well. That is where in 1866, Congress authorized blacks to join the Army. An interesting fact about her unit was that they had a nickname, the Buffalo Soldiers. Although she never saw combat, Cathay took part in many activities including scouting missions, guard duty, and garrison duty. During her time serving, Cathay would end up with an illness called smallpox. Catching smallpox made Cathay very sick and caused her to be hospitalized many times. After multiple hospitalizations, the Army found out that she was actually a woman. And from there, Cathay was honorably discharged by her commanding officer. Sadly, the end of Cathay's life was unfair. Unlike treatment for other female soldiers, after becoming ill, the request for her disability pension was denied by the Army. In 1893, after an examination by a doctor, Williams suffered from severe neuralgia and diabetes, causing the doctor to amputate all of her toes. Even after that, when looking to have disability payments approved for Williams, the doctor said she still did not qualify based on her illness being a pre-existing condition that she had before serving in the military. The life of Cathay Williams ended circa 1893. No one knows her actual date of death, but she disappeared from the Trinidad census rolls after that time, so historians are not sure if she died there or moved away. I hope you enjoyed those interesting facts from history, and on the screen there are more videos to keep the learning going.
All right. So we just learned a little about Cathay Williams, who was a Buffalo Soldier. And like a lot of our people, we had to make, water from wine. We had to take our circumstances, flip it, remix it, and make the best out of it. And she did just that. And like Stagecoach Mary and Harriet Tubman and others of that ilk, she did her level best to manifest and manipulate her conditions so that, it was a blessing to her and her family. And what's interesting is that most of the time, you would think that the Buffalo Soldiers were just guys, and for the most part, they were. Now, I have a question for everybody listening out there because we're blasting off to about 5 channels right now. We're definitely on YouTube, we're on Twitch, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on D Live Trovo Nation. We're on a lot of different spaces. We are the Real HD Show. Facebook is still a little sketchy, but we're working on that. Facebook is giving us some issues, but nonetheless, one monkey don't stop no show. But back to Cathay Williams. Cathay Williams, Buffalo Soldier. Do you guys think that this is like a Mulan type of deal? Do you think that she presents, and is she breaking the mold of what was norm at the time, of course? And then what mark do you think she left for women in the future as far as, serving in the military? And is this just a product of her having to do for our people, more or less? Or do you think this is a product of desperation and need? Or is it kind of something in between? Let us know. Put it in the chat. I'll put up where you're at on the issue and we could talk about it. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, during that time period, a lot of the Buffalo Soldiers, unfortunately, were running from trouble past. They were running from, plantation situations that went awry, like Bass Reeves. He had to get out of that situation and get into Indian native territory so that he could save his life, because unfortunately, him and the person that was the owner of the plantation he was on, they went at it over his freedom, and he had to bust a move. So a lot of people who had to make those unique contributions found themselves in some untenable situations during that time period where they had to bust a move, get out of a dangerous situation, and joining the armed forces, like like a lot of people in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was a solution to what ailed them at the time. Um, and it was a kind of a quick fix. So let us know what you think. What do you think of, you know, Mary Williams? You know what I mean? Do you think that, I'm sorry, Kathy Williams. Sorry about that, not Mary. I'm thinking of Stagecoach Mary. She's one of, we're finding out more and more. See, this is why history is important, because we're finding out more and more and more that there's more women that were active during that time period that's actually written in the history books. And that's why it's important to do Ancestors and Elders Blueprint. That's why it's important to do Stolen Legacy, and all of those segments that we do on the show, because we learn more and more about how our sisters have more of a footprint in the 1900s, than they're actually given credit for. And of course, we know, because, other folks were allowed to write the story, all our folks are suffering from the true narrative. You know what I mean? So let us know in the chat where you're at with that. Let us know what you think of Kathy Williams, Buffalo Soldier, her contribution to, um, you know, her contribution to the Buffalo Soldiers, her contribution to the, you know, war experience. And does that give you a new, found sense and presence of pride in terms of Memorial Day, knowing that we have so many good sisters? We have the World War II regiments of, sisters that contributed. We got the sisters that contributed to NASA. We got Kathy Williams, who contributed as a Buffalo Soldier. Does that give you a renowned sense of pride, knowing that we have more to do with the founding and the raising of the country? Now, remember, the Buffalo Soldiers were commandeered to handle the West, to deal with the natives, because, of course, we were mixed with the natives. Um, some think we actually are the natives. And also, um, we have more of a contribution of settling the West than even some of the macro groups that are in the country and what they would claim right now. You know what I mean? So just like, when Nathaniel Rochester brought a bunch of people from Maryland up to Rochester and cleared away the swamp and the brush, let history tell it, and you would think that only Anglo men had anything to do with the founding of Rochester, and that would be totally false. So the 1800s, that that was a really interesting time period, for contributions, and because it was overshadowed by the, of course, the Civil War, and then of course the awakenings, and then of course early in the century you had the Black and Seminole War. So that century was really marred by a lot of war grief and, you know terror stricken incidents like war. And now we're unpeeling the layer, we're peeling away the layer, and we're finding what's really popping during that joint. Let us know what you think about, Kathy Williams. Shout out to Jazz. She gave me this uh, little tidbit. Our associate producer. Thank you, Jazz. This was really, really dope. I hope you guys gained a lot. And let us jump into our next segment. Our next segment is the AAT report, Healthy, Wealthier, and Wiser. Let's go. So our AAT report today comes from Mozzie. It's a Mozzie-tastic take. Maybe he'll join us a little bit later, maybe not. But either way, we're going to rock this out and we're going to talk about it just a bit. And we are going to get in and we are going to get out of this because we have a lot to cover today. So let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get through it. Here we go. Healthy, wealthier, and wiser. Jewels for living. AAT report. Check it out.
No idea this is going on. No idea. They're shutting down the food supply worldwide. They are culling the livestock. They are buying up and shutting down the farmlands. They're cutting off farms from water like they're doing in Idaho, 500,000 acres of prime farmland. In Oregon, they're stopping you from growing your own food in your backyard and imposing severe restrictions to your water usage there. They are saying to reach our carbon goals, we're going to destroy the ability to produce beef, chicken, eggs, and fish. Call it whatever you want. Say it's for climate change. Say it's for health. But the outcome's always the same. You're just trying to shut the food system down. Why these people hate this, why this is a threat to them, can only be explained by literally being at war with God's creation. This is an act of war against humanity. Yeah.
All right. I'll play it one more time for the slow people in the back because this is mighty, mighty interesting, especially given the inflation, some would say stagflation, but especially given the inflationary times that we live in. And then, of course, with the savage inequalities that our people face, there's no wonder why we're going through these things. There's a larger context at play. Check it out.
The average person, no idea this is going on. No idea. They're shutting down the food supply worldwide. They are culling the livestock. They are buying up and shutting down the farmlands. They're cutting off farms from water like they're doing in Idaho, 500,000 acres of prime farmland. In Oregon, they're stopping you from growing your own food in your backyard and imposing severe restrictions to your water usage there. They are saying to reach our carbon goals, we're going to destroy the ability to produce beef, chicken, eggs, and fish. Call it whatever you want. Say it's for climate change. Say it's for health. But the outcome's always the same. You're just trying to shut the food system down. Why these people hate this, why this is a threat to them, can only be explained by literally being at war with God's creation. This is an act of war against humanity.
All right. So how do you guys feel about that? What does that mean to you? Is the trying to destroy the food supply, is that in fact an act of war? Is that toying with what is an inalienable right? You let us know. Um, I think that this is more of a reason why we would need to um, grow our own food, produce our own food, and make arrangements with each other as community to get the things we need and to move accordingly so that we're not so dependent on, these piddles that they give us in these, city constructs. Because if you've been watching the show for a little while, you'll find out that they're also trying to change the paradigm of living cities. So all of this stuff has to change. If they're changing the paradigms of living, if the macro society is changing the paradigms of economics, if they want to move towards a more global, I guess, way at dealing with, um, you know, mega health and, international health crises, um, you know, we have to be prepared for what all of that means. Um, we have to definitely be prepared. So let us know what you think of that. And are you prepared to grow your own food? Are you prepared to raise your own livestock if you're a meat eater? I'm not a meat eater, so I'm not in that category, but I do know those who are meat eaters. And if this thing gets way out of hand, way out of pocket, are you prepared to give up meat, beef, and chicken because the Gates of the world, Monsantos of the world, all of these people that are responsible for the food supply and how the food supply is, doled out to the rest of the country, are we prepared to have a change in the way that that is distributed and how that's going to affect our lives, especially as melanated people? Let us know, man. Will this be a return to our people being the agrarian masters that we used to be? If you think about the Gullah Geechees, or you think about some of the people on the west coast of Africa, if you go to like the Gambia, or you go to Senegal, and you'll see that they have like 1,000 recipes for mango, because mango grows so wild and abundant there. And they have become the agrarian masters of mango and coconut and mangroves and all type of stuff like that. So ain't nothing new under the sun. And things definitely go in cycles. So is food going back to a more organic cycle out of the industrial age of it all, and back to more of a organic agrarian style cycle? You know, did you listen to grandma when grandma was in the backyard trying to teach you how to, raise tomatoes and raise cucumbers and raise greens and raise, all of the things that she put her hands on and was nice at, manufacturing out of the earth? Were you paying attention so that you can do that for you and yours? I was. And if you can't, we have these expensive products called computers and phones and things and such. We could jump on there and learn how to do this stuff and help ourselves in a for real way. So let us know what you think of that particular clip, and about, what that means for our food, what that means for our livelihood, and what's the next step. And now that we have AI and we have cloning and we have 3D printing, I don't know if you guys remember, we did the show on 3D printed meat. They got 3D printed salmon, 3D printed shrimp, 3D printed pretty much everything. What do you think, if that's the way that the Industrial Revolution is headed, into that sort of tech space? Are you prepared to have tech affect your food? It's a lot of interesting things popping. We're going to have an AI segment a little bit later where we're going to talk about like robots and different things like that. So, right now, what I want to do though is, because the last time we were here, we were talking about the vid, right? Right. And we were talking about how even this channel had some issues because YouTube, struck down my channel because they said that I was giving false information. Only to have, and we're still in a AAT report, by the way. We're still in the middle of an AAT report. But it says here, Kansas files explosive lawsuit accusing um, one of the giant pharmaceutical companies over the Rona and the jab and the implications of mandating that for people. So I'm going to read a little bit about it. I'm going to read the byline, read a paragraph or two, and see. And we'll see how this sits with everybody. Because I can remember people protesting. I can remember the firemen and the teachers and the policemen in New York City protesting over not wanting to do this and not having to do this. And then, that particular pharmaceutical company came out with uh, on page 19 of their report, they came out with a super explosive adverse effects listing. And they listed it over, I guess, what was it, 3,000 adverse health effects because of it, including, you know, you know, paralysis in some senses, myocarditis, all types of things. So let's read it. It says, Kansas files explosive lawsuit accusing Pfizer of misleading the public on Rona risks, right? And it says the state of Kansas, and this is not me, this is NR. This is an article out of NR, plus Healthcare magazine. So I'm not being homophobic, xenophobic, or giving misleading information. This is public information from a public uh, healthcare website. So here we go. Kansas files explosive lawsuit over Pfizer and Rona. All right, here we go. The state of Kansas filed a protection lawsuit against the giant pharmaceutical company that led the jabs last week on the full of accusations on the pharmaceutical giant misled the public on safety and efficacy of the Rona jab, right? And if you could, well, you can't see the picture, but there's a little clip of the women on The View arguing with the doctor who was from Kansas, who's talking about this. Kansas is accusing the giant pharmaceutical company of, what does it say? Knowingly misleading the public about the adverse effects of the jab and manipulating the jab trials in violation of state consumer protection law and consent judgments. Sounds a little bit like what the teachers and the firefighters and the cops were fighting for in New York. The lawsuit cites interviews and press releases, internal documents, scientific research, government research, news reporting, and other information to back up its incendiary claims. Quote, the pharmaceutical company, quote, and its Rona jab, okay, was claimed to be safe even though the jab was connected to serious adverse health effects, including myocarditis, pericarditis, failed pregnancies, paralysis, and deaths. Pfizer concealed this critical safety information from the public, the lawsuit asserts. I'll read a little bit more. Let me see if anybody joined. Okay, nobody joined yet. Don't forget to hit the link at the bottom, streamyard.com 842 CPIQ CIZ, and you can join the show and talk your ish, and we can have a higher discussion. Okay, so we're back to it. So the Kansas lawsuit. So Pfizer's government contract appears to have been given the company influence over the freedom of FOIA requests, right? Disclosures, and contain confidentiality agreements with the U.S. government. Kansas alleges that the confidentiality agreements allowed the company to hide material facts and mislead customers. And Fauci was just on trial with Rand Paul, going back and forth about, and this is not in the article, this is just me talking, the efficacy and the integrity and honesty of what they were telling people during the DZ, right? The Pandeezy, right? And a lot of people, there were a lot of naysayers. There were a lot of people that were misbelieving of what this meant. And there were a lot of people who felt trapped, that they had to get the poker, because if not, they would lose their livelihood, they would lose and of course, a lot of people are check to check, and that wouldn't be, that would eventually lead people to lose a lot within their lifestyle. And then, of course, it ended a lot of people's lives due to the adverse health effects. But we continue. The Kansas lawsuit alleges pharmaceutical company intentionally destroyed the control group and its Rona trial by giving participants access to the poke, to the juice, says the New England Journal of Medicine. Britain did a lot of, this is just me talking now too. Great Britain did a lot of exposing of this as well. By destroying the control group, the Kansas lawsuit asserts that the safety of the poke cannot be fairly evaluated by comparing the poke group to an unpoked group. It also claimed by delaying the release of the data from its trials, citing 2 articles in the British Medical Journal, there goes Britain again, just talked about it, about scientists waiting for the pharmaceutical companies, the major two, Pfizer and Moderna, to turn over the patient level data. In addition, the lawsuit alleges that it tested only healthy patients during its trials, a departure from standard procedure. Allegedly failed to disclose. So why this is important is for a number of reasons. Number one, during the DZ, right? They were shutting down a lot of people's pages, channels who had an alternate view from what Fauci, Trump, CDC, and the rest of the giant pharmaceutical companies were talking about. Meanwhile, there were patents that were already bought that were being exploited. There were lawsuits being launched uh, claiming that people were biological properties if they had received the juice. All kinds of things was happening. And this show reported on that. We daggone sure did. And we did it very thoroughly. We told you about some of the risks, some of the effects. The report didn't come out yet with all of the adverse health effects. But if you remember RARES, I believe it was called RARES. RARES had like a ticker, and it had people reporting on how many people were getting sick, how many people were debilitating, and how many people were passing because of this forced societal mandate, if you will, over this. So Britain, Kansas, and many, many others are, in the fray and fighting the good fight to try to understand why these things have happened, why these things are even something to even talk about or go through. And we can, tap in, let me know what you think about it. Do you think this show deserved to be shut down for a week on the tube simply because we were talking about it? And should I sue as the proprietor of my channel? Because that was a week I couldn't come to you. That was a week I couldn't promote, advertise, or distribute on the platform. And I had gotten a couple of warnings concerning misinformation from the tube, right? About this very thing. You know what I'm saying? And I find that really interesting. I find that super, super interesting. Let me know if you find it interesting. Let me know if you have something to say about it. Let me know if this is something that you care about. Or were you impacted? Were you forced to get the juice? And then once you got the juice, that was something that impacted you. Did you have an adverse condition because you had to get the juice? Let us know. Put it in the comment. Let's talk about it. Let's have a higher discussion. Speaking of misleading information, let's jump right into our Power to the People news, right? Power to the People news. What just happened in the news? This just happened. So it says, press release, UN, United Nations, launches recommendations for urgent action to curb harm from spreading mis and disinformation and hate speech. Wow. So we're living in quite a time right now where we're out of the Crown news and we're right into Khazar news, right? And both campaigns were campaigns about anti-communication, about shutting down, in the first world countries, the ability for freedom of speech, freedom of communication. And then we also found out that Biden had to go in front of Biden's people, the executive office, had to cop to the fact that the CIA and the FBI were working with social media outlets to limit people speaking and utilizing their freedom of speech during the worldwide time, and now during the, you know, rampant Khazar period. So I find that real interesting. And I think that we have to be super vigilant about the way we go about thinking about um, constitutional rights as they are, and, competing groups. Because, of course, we're in a Saturn cycle, an election cycle. Go back and look at my election show. You'll find out why I call it the Saturn cycle, right? That's the L, right? And then now we're entering a paradigm where money is changing, rights are changing, and we have the nativists, which are the conservatives, going up against the globalists, which just happen to be the, um, what do you call that? The leftist competing group to the nativists or the conservatives, right? Biden versus Trump, right? And then we also have the BRICS countries. And all of those competing factions are fighting for hegemony, for power. And this right here is just one of the many ways that they are fighting for power. Um, and if they could keep the public quiet, then they can achieve their goals of shutting down unalienable rights for people that people have without actually getting permission to do this. Um, you gotta let us know what you think about it. Are you prepared to give that up? Are we prepared to give that up for conveniences, for life and health? Just to find out that if you ate an orange every day during the DZ, during the worldwide DZ, you would have been okay. You didn't have to run out and get the juice. But then, you would risk your livelihood, your employment, all the other things that you had in tow. Um, yeah. Speaking of having things in tow, there's a very interesting thing going on because we're in the Khazar period, and the Khazar period presents a lot of. Well, let me do this first. Let's go here because we were just talking about rights. So let's jump right into this story. Power to the people. Well, wait, what just happened? This just happened. I know everybody, unless you've been living under a rock, you heard of this. Uh, Louisiana is forcing schools to promote, recite, and honor the Ten Commandments in their public schools. And the ACLU has a lawsuit going against them um, for that very reason. And I find that very interesting. And of course, these are all people battling for power, vying for control, vying for controlling interests of what goes on. Globalists, BRICS nations, nativists, right? And whenever you see that, you always know that there are some clandestine groups that have a vested interest in how all of these factions are run. Um, if you see China merging with Russia, merging with Iran, merging with India, Cuba, and South Africa, there are some clandestine things going on. If you see a consortium groups of Western nations getting together, having G7 like meetings and coming up with and handling how Haiti is going to purport itself as a democratic government and not the Haitian people, then there are some clandestine, detestable things popping off in that circumstance as well. So we have to think in that regard also. One thing I want the family to know is that when this is very eerily reminiscent of how the Pledge of Allegiance was instituted into um, schools and classrooms and civic organizations all over the country too. And that was led in the Lyndon B. Johnson era, slightly earlier, by none other than the KKK. The KKK led the charge in getting the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance recited in most public schools. Started in parochial schools, because of course they wanted to align with Christian ethics, and then it expanded into public schools. And now it's kind of a pastime in the country. Everybody's expected to stand. Everybody's expected to, you know, capitulate or, bend the knee or, you know, give some sort of reverence to this, even if that dreaded fourth verse of the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star Spangled Banner outlines the degradation and slavery of melanated people in this country. We're still expected to fully embrace it and fully embrace the garbage. Um, so even though I don't really care for the ACLU in a lot of ways, because I think that a lot of these American orgs, NGOs, don't really get to the root. They kind of just spin wheels so that they can maintain their status and their stratification throughout the country. I think that if a lot of these organizations wanted to get to the bottom of these things, they would do things a lot heavier than just make lawsuits. I think they would have a lot more of an impact. And I think a lot more would get done. I think, the wheel of perpetuation, people love to stay on the wheel of perpetual nothingness just because they're okay with the status quo. As long as they can go home to their suburbs in Levittown and their two-car garage and their picket fence and, act like they're the DA, but they're not beholden to anything because they have some sort of title in society, Sandra Dorley, then they can keep things as status quo, give shills and pennies and attention to real matters with real people. Meanwhile, they get to live a cushy existence without challenge. Um, and I think that's what's going on here. I think what's going on here also is you have some of the Claremont Institute influence. That's the big conservative think tank, and you know, kind of conservative, dare I say, racist um, organizational onset that wants to reverse the clock. They want to take away women's right to vote. They want to go back into the lost cause way that the country was ran in the antebellum South. They want to put the genie back in the bottle. Right. And, you know, time doesn't work that way, you know. But if they had it their way, they would have all white towns and districts. They would have a return to conservative Christendom. And I'm not saying that that stuff doesn't need balance. I'm not even saying that stuff doesn't need correcting. It just doesn't need their version of balance and their version of correction. I think the people who were the most made the most and set aside the most, oppressed the most, those should be the ones that reap the rewards of whatever changes are made. But that can only happen if we organize, we org, and we get together and we create strategy, not just marching in the street, and we chart a course at changing this stuff for the better. Um, so the one thing about this particular article I wanted to let you guys know is that not only is this unconstitutional what they're doing because it's the violation of separation in church and state doctrine, and that's what the ACLU is suing Louisiana over, but it's also part of that clandestine uh, ethic that I think a lot of groups, a lot of nativist groups, want to represent in the in the way that they go about their business. and how they want to see this Saturn election cycle manifest itself. The nativist group wants to return to the 1800s. The globalist group wants a, you know, Khazarian one world type of governmental structure. And the BRICS nations want to destroy the dollar and to be more respected on a global scale. And they will upset the apple cart of economy across the globe in order to do it. So which one do you align in? And do you think that melanated people, with the 200 something million people that we have on the planet, probably more at this point, do you think we deserve to lead a charge as the original stewards of the planet? When will we step up and create plan, strategy, and access to forge the rest of the country ahead? There's one more story I'm going to get into before I shut it down. I'm going to shut it down at 9 because I don't think anyone is going to jump on tonight, and that's fine. I'm just looking for the story now, and as soon as I find it, I'll go through it. Here's a story that's kind of interesting because I brought it up before. I'll just mention it real quick. So Jamal Bowman lost the election in New York, right? Shout out to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie. And the reason why I brought this up is because I brought it up on the show that a lot of Khazarian influence is going into lobbying groups, especially APAC, going against a lot of the Congressional Black Caucus people who aren't down with the Khazars. If you're not down with the czars, as they call it, right, then they're going to spend money on trying to unseat you as an American politician. And once again, like I said before, I'll say it again. If they can have that sort of influence over how American politics is settled, then is American politics beholden to ourselves or beholden to them? And if it's beholden to them, who's really running the country? Meanwhile, there were about 9 or 10 congressional Black caucuses members of Congress, senators, or what have you. And they were down. They were ready to get it. And I did a whole show on that, a whole expose on that, how the CBJ, I believe is there, CDJ, which was one of the older Czarian, I guess, lobbying groups, basically paid for the civil rights movement. And they were a governmental lobbying group. And because America has almost an 100-year affinity with that group, and now APAC is the ruling group that, is pushing a lot of agendas forward. How does that impact what America does with its government? And if we're beholden to them, is the American government for the people, or is the American government for the czars? So you let us know. The UN is the UN is smack dab in the middle of New York City, smack dab in the middle of the economic center of the world, and it's a like I told you in that one show, it has sovereignty unto itself. It doesn't even answer to the state of New York. It doesn't answer to the federal government. It's its own sovereign entity. Smack dab in the middle of the state of New York. Smack dab middle of the epicenter of the money capital of the world. Just things that make you go, things that make you think. But the one thing I wanted to talk about real quick, and I was hoping my crew would get on, but I'm not going to hold them. I know they got families and things and all type of stuff that they doing. I know, people are trying to open up, bookstores and art galleries and all types of stuff. You know what? I'll save that particular topic I was going to do, and I'll do this one. There was a Virginia family, right? And that particular Virginia family adopted some black children, five of them, I believe, and they turned them into effectual slaves. I'm going to read a little bit of that, and that will be the last um, thing that we do for the evening. Let's see, Virginia couple kids turn kids. Now these were adopted black kids, right? These were adopted black children, and this says a lot about a lot, right? And I think this is important for a number of reasons, right? Because, um, and here it is. I'll share my screen and we can jump into this. I appreciate everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening. We're blasting off to like 9 channels. I will re-upload this onto Facebook, so the Facebook contingent can check this out. But for right now, I'll share my screen and we can get to it. Let me see if you guys can see that. Okay, so I'll pull that up. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so I'll bring that title down a bit so that you guys can see. Okay, so it says West Virginia couple accused of adopting black children and forcing them to work as slaves. Gene Whitefeather, 62, Donald Lance, 63, allegedly adopted 5 black children from a shelter and made them do farm labor. But that's just like the kind of onset of it, right? So it says Virginia deputies forced their way onto a barn on the property where they found 2 children in a small room. It says West Virginia couple is facing charges of human trafficking, child neglect, forced labor. More after prosecutors allege they adopted 5 children from a shelter to do forced labor and live in deplorable conditions. It says that it targeted the children and forced them to do labor specifically because of their race. And according to the 16-count indictment, it alleges human trafficking violations, human rights violations specific to the fact that these children were targeted because of their ancestry and that they were basically used as chattel from what the indictment alleges. Whitefeather and Lance are being held at South Central Jail in Kanawha County on $500,000 bail, according to jail records. Both pleaded not guilty. They pleaded not guilty. It's interesting. Kanawha County Sheriff deputies found the children in October during a welfare check at the couple's Sissonville home. Deputies forced their way in there and found the 2 children living in a small room. The children had no means to exit the barn on their own, no running water, no bathroom facilities, and they were obviously deprived of adequate hygienic care and food. Police said then found a small child locked inside the main home alone. The 2 children in the barn were 14 and 16, forced to sleep on a concrete floor. Um, the indictment said the children were dirty, of course, weren't clean, and had open sores on their feet. The neighbors also reported that the children were forced to perform farm labor and were not permitted inside the residence. So now we got, field hands, house hands, field nigga, house nigga, that sort of thing. Lance arrived at the home hours later with an 11-year-old boy, and he led the deputies to a 6-year-old girl who was staying with friends of the couple. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So I'll stop right there. So the reason why this is important is because the the Foster the Foster industrial complex in this country is way past bedtime. And the reason I say that is that I'm a teacher and I'm a mandated reporter. And as a mandated reporter, whenever a student comes in with some sort of home difficulty that they're wearing on their face or their body, or they're unkept, or they're, in some sort of, debilitated state, I'm forced to report that as a teacher and as a witness to what's going on with the child. CPS gets involved. They take the child from the parents, at least temporarily, put them in these crazy custody situations. And then the crazy custody situations turn into the parents having to prove that they're fit to raise their own children. Meanwhile, the couples that inherit these kids from these foster kidnappings, as I would like to call it, because just because the kid had a debilitating situation doesn't, it's more of a cry for help from to the parent. And I never see CPS ask these parents if they need help. I just see them snatching the kids. And they never ask if the kids have medical conditions. They never ask if the kids are rogue. They never ask if, you know, those sorts of things are at play. And the reason why that is because of something called parens patriae. And that was a law that was made because of the vagrancy laws of the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, as a result of World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Soldiers would make babies, leave families, and then the government would have to fit the bill. And then, of course, that in effect created Title IV, and the effect of, what do you call that? Going after fathers for child support. But never do I see CPS question to that length what the adopting families are doing with the children, but they give the parents the ringer, never asking, do you have adequate childcare so that your child could get ready for school on time, if in case you have to go to work simultaneously. There's an assumption in America that everybody is on a level playing field, and never the fact that maybe a parent that's a single parent has to leave their children, depend on the older sibling, to steward the kids while they're going to work early. And if the parent doesn't go to work early and the older sibling doesn't steward the other kids properly, then you run into debilitating situations like these. And a lot of people don't know about parents patriae, which basically gives the government overarching judgment and power to take away children from the home. That's the reason why if your kid is going through any sort of gender dysphoria or reassignment or anything medically adverse that has to do with their sexuality, the parents can get arrested and the parents can do time if they don't, if they don't adhere to the wishes of the child in terms of their sex and gender. When really what we're talking about is the parent need for help, support, and, kind of, TLC for the child. So I think that's very important. And I think a lot of the foster care industrial complex gets away with doing this because, they get money, federal money, state money, local money to do this with these children and adversely affect these kids' lives that way and families' lives. And sometimes these kids never find their way back to their parents after they're put through this little parents patriae uh, CPS exercise of micromanaging children. And I think it's crap. I think it's BS. And I think, there should be a lot more done as a community. We should have our community auspices. And these are the sorts of things that we need to be fighting for if we're going to participate in the Saturn process of electing the pres dore in Congress, then we need to also, put them to task about things like this that break up, disrupt families, and cause hardships and heartaches to families that are just trying to, um, make a way for themselves. I remember Kamala Harris was the AG of California, and she was locking up hella parents who kids turned out to be truant because the mother or the father would have to go to work, the kids would have to make their way to school on their own, and some of them decide not to go, some decide to skip, and of course you can't skip on that good tax money, so we need them kids in them seats every single day, or you don't get that good lunch, you don't get that good tax money from the federal government. So let us know what you think of this. I'm gonna shut it down right here. This has been a higher discussion. This is your man Vic on the Real HD Show. Please remember to timestamp what you liked about the show. Like, share, and subscribe. Turn on your notifications and comment so that every time we have a Real HD show, you are notified so we can have a higher discussion. And we'll be back next Wednesday. I have something to do with the fam on Monday, but we'll definitely be back next Wednesday and to have a higher discussion starting off, I guess, the month of July. So we'll get into it then. Y'all tune into us. We will definitely be tuning into you and the rest of what's going on in the country on the Real HD Show. Peace. And y'all walk with power out there, man. Y'all love on each other. And we will be back next on Wednesday, hump day. Peace, y'all. Y'all be good. Peace to all my 50 crew.